welcome to my channel. Welcome to today's video. Today's video, I have the Glaminatrix Sugar and Spice palette here. And when I picked this up, I actually picked up two other Glaminatrix palettes that I have been wanting. So the Into the Night palette as well as the Nearly Natural palette. So I'm going to be doing 3 looks with each one of these palettes, taking you through the looks, giving you maybe a little bit of inspiration if you have any of these palettes, and then going over just my thoughts on the brand. This was just my first time trying them overall. I took a very big leap of faith picking up 3 palettes at the same time, but just giving you my first impression thoughts on the formula of these and who I think that they'd be good for. So if that sounds good to you, if you like eyeshadow palette videos, make sure you give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't yet. And with that, let's just get started talking about these palettes. All right, so there is a lot to go over. I think we're gonna start with the Sugar and Spice palette and just go from newer release to older release. Now there's a lot to cover because I have 3 looks per palette, so I will have chapters listed down below if you're only interested in one of the palettes. And then I also will have any of the makeup that I'm wearing today listed in the description box. The description box has a ton of info in it, so make sure you check that if you have any questions. But let's just get started going over the looks that I did with this palette, and then I'll kind of just get into my thoughts on this. So the first shade that I'm going into with the Sugar and Spice palette was Mint, really just laying that all over the lid, trying to get that as like a base color, bring some lightness to the look. I didn't have too much of a plan. I really just wanted to try and make sure that for all 3 looks, I was using as many of the colors that I could. And I really did, I think, accomplish that with all 3 of the palettes. So I'm just trying to get like a base down for this. And I'm just kind of learning at this point that you really have to press these shadows down and get placement first, and then you can kind of blend. So after I go in with Mint, I then go in with Brownie, and I'm just trying to add some definition to the outer corner there, too much, and you can kind of see I'm just struggling with that shade. It's not as dark as it's looking in pan, and because I'm trying to blend it and not press it down and it's already over a shadow, I was just having a little bit of trouble with the pigmentation. But again, I was kind of just learning the palette. I wasn't really sure what kind of formula it had at this point. I wasn't going to completely scrap the look though. So I'm just trying to build up the depth as much as I can. And then I'm taking that same shade Brownie and just adding that to my lower lash line and blending it out with the shade Mint afterwards to kind of smoke and diffuse that. Then I go in with the fun shade, which is Fennel, and I'm just applying that mostly all over my lid there. It's a really pretty color, and I wanted to have the green from Mint just help pop that shade. And I'm just now pressing it more into the inner corner, putting this all over the lid. Then I took Vanilla, which is the lightest shade, and put that in my inner corner to just add like a little pop of sparkle. And taking the black shade Licorice and lining my top and bottom lash line with that color. Licorice is probably my favorite shade in the palette. It's a really nice black. I was very impressed by this shade. It's very opaque and easy to work with, and I'm usually a little bit nervous with blacks, so I was pretty surprised. So I went in for it and tried to do like a little bit of a baby wing. I'm not really too much of a wing person, but I was trying to step out of my comfort zone. You'll see that a lot in these looks. But here is look number 1 with the Sugar and Spice palette. And now I have both eyes complete, and you'll see it shortly with my glasses on as well, just in case you are also someone who wears glasses. Now let's jump in immediately to look number 2. I took the shade Brulee and kind of just put that all over my lid. I did forget to say that I set every single one of these looks. I used my NARS Soft Matte Concealer as a eyeshadow base. And then again, going in with Brownie to deepen up that outer corner. I was hoping that Brulee would help me with the shade Brownie since I was having trouble with it in look number 1. So that's kind of why I lay down that shade, even though it's pretty much a skin tone shade for my skin tone at least. And it did help a little bit, but I still struggled with that shade because it just wasn't giving me the depth that I wanted, and it wasn't blending super easily. Once I was satisfied with how Brownie worked, I took my NYX glitter glue just to see if that would help with the shimmers. I did have a full face on. I was trying to avoid fallout, but I knew it was probably going to happen. And then I took Basil and pressed that into the NYX glitter glue all over the lid. Basil is such a pretty color. I would argue and say it's probably my favorite color in the palette. It just has like this really beautiful mermaid element to it, that purple blue transparent shift that I just love. And then I took lavender and kind of placed that more on the inner corner. I do wish after I did that I kind of had switched it, put basil in the inner corner, lavender on the outer corner, because lavender was a little bit more opaque than basil. However, the damage was done, so I was stuck where I was. And then right after, I took Gumdrop, which is kind of more that matte lavender, and put that on the lower lash line, so that way I could really just tie that purple lavender shade together. And again, taking vanilla, putting it on the inner corner just to add more brightness. I really like that vanilla shade. And following that up, going in with licorice to line my lower and bottom lash line. I already said this in look number 1, but I was really impressed by the shade licorice. I thought it looked great. Here's the finished look with both eyes done, and again with my glasses, just in case you also wear glasses, you can see how it looks. With look number 3, this was my most risky look. So I took Sticky Date and I put that all over in my crease just to kind of lay a little bit of color in the crease. You'll see why in just a second, but I kind of wanted to have something to transition the next shade. Like I said, I was really impressed with that licorice color, so I decided to try it as an all-over smoky eye look. And I was a little nervous, not gonna lie, but I think that it turned out really well. And really, I'm just gonna be going back and forth. This look didn't take me that long to do, but it was a lot of just blending, going back and forth between licorice and Sticky Date. Here I'm putting Sticky Date on the lower lash line, not the licorice shade, just to have a little bit of smokiness still, but not black. I kind of want the black to be more of a base. And then I took the shade Mustard and put that all over the lid, which really just added another layer to that mustard shade and made it pop and made it more of a black multi-chrome. And then I took Star Anise to just put on the inner corner so I could try as many shades as possible, and went back with Brulee to blend out those edges. So that way I would have more of a seamless transition, because it is a little bit hard to have a black smoky eye. Let me tell you, the amount of time I spent blending was a lot. You're just seeing a very short 2-minute clip here. Of course, going in with vanilla to brighten up the inner corner, and licorice to line my lower and top lash line. I did get some fallout, as you probably saw. I was expecting that because Mustard was just such a thicker shimmer shade that maybe I need to just go in a little bit thinner next time. I probably packed it onto my finger. I added a wing again to this look just because I thought that it needed it. And here it is, finished, complete. I also just added some false lashes. I'm wearing the Lily lashes in the style Sassy, and here it is completed with my glasses. Now, I quite liked this palette overall. I think I tried almost all the shades except for Meringue, Taffy, and Nutmeg. Nutmeg, I wasn't too worried about because this is just my shade through and through. I know that this shade is really pretty. These two, I just don't know what to do with them in the palette. My only just complaint against this is that I did struggle the most out of the 3 palettes coming up with looks for this. And I feel like these are just out of place. I'll even settle for this Taffy shade to have like a bright yellow and a bright purple. But this meringue shade, I feel like could have just been used Brulee and then subbed this out for a more neutral brown to kind of have a little bit more variety. You really only have these 3 neutrals, one being a black, this kind of being like a more gray, kind of greeny, and then this dark brown, which, you know, it swatches nice, but when I blend it out, I just had a little bit of trouble getting the pigment payoff. you really, like I said, you have to pack these colors and then blend them out. It's just a different technique than I'm used to. I'm just used to really kind of going in and blending right away. So there was a little bit of a learning curve for me, but overall, I like this color story. I would rank it number 2 out of all the ones we're gonna talk about. So this is the Sugar and Spice palette. Let's now move into the Night, because that was the one that was released before Sugar and Spice. So here is what it's looking like. And let's just start going over the looks I created with this palette. So for the Into the Night palette, I thought it would be easiest to work in quadrants. I also just had trouble with color story on this one, more just my visual mind, but I took the shade Play Hard and I'm putting that all over the crease transition shade to just lay down a color, have something there kind of in the crease that's a little bit lighter. And then I'm taking the shade Showbiz, which is kind of like a deeper dark blue gray, and deepening up the outer corner with that shade just to add some depth, because Play Hard is a lot lighter. It's the lightest shade in the palette other than the neons. And I'm also gonna take the shade Showbiz and just put that on the lower lash line just to connect it to that outer corner, and taking Play Hard and blending out Showbiz with that so it's a little bit more smoky and not just a stark line. And that gives me my matte base to then go in with my shimmers. And I had a plan to use the shade After Dark kind of on the outer half of the lid, but it did not work out that way because this shade is very, very opaque. I was not expecting such an opaque silver shadow. Like, this is a silver shadow. I have nothing like it in my collection. It's very nice. I just wasn't expecting that, and I had a different plan in mind. So I ended up just taking this all over the lid because it spread out so easily. There are my fingers to just show you how much it's spread out. And then I took Showbiz again to just deepen up that outer corner, re-deepen it up because it kind of got lost under that After Dark shade because the silver was just so opaque. And then I'm going to take the last shade in that quadrant, which is On the Rocks, and I'm going completely over After Dark. It kind of just ties in Showbiz to the look and takes this like iridescent blue translucent color on top of the silver and makes it a little bit more blue to tie into Showbiz. So afterwards, I then took my black eyeliner from Dior, lined my bottom and top lash line right there, and that's the finished look on one eye, both eyes complete, and of course showing you with my glasses just in case. Jumping into look number 2, I wanted to go in with that neon quadrant on the left-hand side. So I'm now starting to press in with the shade Moonlight on the inner half of my transition crease, and then going in with neon lights on the outer half. And I'm gonna spend quite a bit of time just trying to blend the two as best as I can, kind of create like that ombre effect between the pink and the yellow, and really just blend the two using the same brush and just going back and forth to create like a nice transition, and doing my best. After I'm happy with that blend, I'm then going to take the shade Top Shelf, which I think is the star of the palette, and put that on the outer half of the lid here, just to kind of mimic that neon pink that we have going on the outer half of the lid. I really like this shade. And then afterwards, I took the shade Happy Hour, the last shade in that quadrant, and put it on the inner lid. It's like a orange, also translucent base, so it didn't pop as much as I wanted, and I kind of brought it really far over onto Top Shelf and really made it more like 3/4 of the eye. And then afterwards, now I'm working on the lower lash line, again with Moonlight and neon lights to just mimic what I have on the top lid, and just go back and forth with blending and trying to get it to be that ombre effect that I'm looking for. I really liked this look. I thought that it was really fun, summery. Summer's almost over, but I'm trying to hang on as much as I can. Then going back in with my black eyeliner to just line my bottom and top lash line, add a little bit of definition. I think this palette really needs that. It doesn't look great if you don't have any kind of liner or something with depth. But that was the completed look. Again, I like how this turned out. It's not something I would wear on the everyday, but I think it was fun and I think it was interesting. Now the last look is going to be the deepest, darkest look. I worked with the quadrant on the right, and I started with Cocktails, which is like a deep olivey green, going into really my crease, not trying to bring it up too high, because then I took the shade Nightlife and deepened up that outer corner. It's like a very dark navy blue. Looks really nice with the green, and you can see that I'm just tapping there, because if you just blend, if your brush is too wispy, you can't get a good application with the colors. So I'm doing the best I can with the wispy brush that I have. I probably should have used just stiffer brushes overall, but I didn't really feel like changing my brushes. After I'm happy with that Nightlife shade, I then took Chaser, which is that maroon shade, and you can see I'm just like lightly tapping it above the crease area, because I'm trying to do like some kind of gradient from the green to the maroon and just add a little bit of maroon at the top. I wanted to make sure that I was using all the shades in the palette. On an everyday, I probably would have skipped one of these mattes, but I wanted to at least test all the shades out, and all these shades were pretty dark and smoky. So I got a little bit of that maroon shade. I maybe would have liked it a little bit starker, but it is what it is. I think the end look turned out really pretty regardless. So now I'm taking Nightlife and I'm just doing my lower lash line. I'm going to take Nightlife as well as Cocktails to just kind of blend that out, to also just bring some more green into the look, because the green's a little bit hidden. You can see then now I'm just re-intensifying that green to really like make sure that it shows. And then the last step I did with the shade Bustling is apply that all over the lid. This is also just kind of one of those mermaidy colors, a little bit more opaque than the one in Sugar and Spice, but it has that blue to purple shift into it. I can see that Glaminatrix really likes this kind of color, and it does look stunning on the lid. It at least added some brightness to the look, because I had 3 very, very dark mattes. I did take Bustling and just kind of really try to work into the inner corner and bring as much light as I could. And of course, I'm going back in with my black eyeliner. Like I said, I think this palette really benefits from a liner. I don't think brown will cut it. I really think you need a black or a dark smoky liner to just add more definition to the lash line. And then there's the look. I did opt to, with this palette and this look, this third look, apply lashes. I again am wearing the Lily lashes in the style Sassy. So this palette, I did manage to use every single one of the shades, and this was the second palette that I tried. I actually did Nearly Natural, which we'll talk about in a second. I did my looks with that one first because that's the one I was most excited about. This one, here's the thing, like I ended up picking this one up because I bought these other 2 palettes, and originally when they announced this, I wasn't going to pick it up. I was intrigued, but I told myself I didn't need it. I'm trying to be a little bit more picky when it comes to making purchases, but then I ended up caving because it was like, if I'm gonna get 2, I might as well get 3. And I should have just trusted my gut on this palette. This palette is fun, it's exciting, but it's not an everyday. There's just too many darks, like too many dark shadows on this side, and then the light shades don't really go with the dark shades. This palette, I have the hardest time with the color story. Like the Glaminatrix Sugar and Spice, I like that one. I have trouble with the color story. I need to maybe look at some inspo photos, but this one I struggle with even more. If ranking these, I would put this number 3, so clearly you're gonna know which one's number 1. It's not that the formula is bad. You do have to press. Already mentioned this, but you need to press and then blend, which is just a technique that's not my favorite, but these neon ones are really pretty. This Happy Hour shade is maybe my favorite shade in the palette. It's just like this really, it surprised me the most out of this. It has like a pink to orange shift. It's very translucent. I tend to like just shimmery shadows like that, how it just like brings some lightness to the look. This shade Top Shelf, I do just want to mention, came broken. It was fine because it had a clear plastic protective cover, so I was able to kind of just press it back in. But this shade is very soft, so you have to be careful. And the shimmer is just, they look different in the pan. Like this silver, like I said, is very, very opaque. This one's kind of translucent. You wouldn't expect that looking at it in the pan. And this one's also a little translucent, which you wouldn't expect looking into the pan. So because I didn't swatch this palette out before applying it and testing it out, and that's my fault, that's my mistake, but I kind of was expecting one thing and it ended up with another with all three of my looks. Really like a good or a bad thing. It's just a thing that I kind of wanted to mention in case you're someone who kind of just dives right in and doesn't swatch out their palettes like I do. You probably will not get what you're expecting right off the bat, and it does have a little bit of a learning curve to it. So now it's time to go over my looks with my number one palette from Glaminatrix. This is the Nearly Natural. I've had this on my wish list for quite a long time, and I'm really glad I finally picked it up. So here is what it's looking like, and let's just get started going over my three looks with this palette. My first look with this palette, I kind of wanted to play with the greeny tones in here. So I first started with Down to Earth, and I'm just kind of patting that into the crease to really get that color to show. It's a nice deep olivey green. And then I'm taking the shade Untouched, which has a little bit more purple, and I'm blending that out above my crease with that color to just add a little bit of purple, not too much green, but I still want that green to show. And then I'm going back in with the green to re-intensify it, that Down to Earth shade. I really liked this shade a lot. I actually love all the colors in here, so I don't know why I'm saying that. And then after I'm happy with just the depth of that, I'm going into Exposed, which is the light green shimmer, and applying that on the inner half of my lid just to kind of have more green in there, and bringing in some naturalness with the shade New Nude on the inner corner, and just kind of having that be half and half, making sure those two shimmers are blended together. Afterwards, I took the shade Down to Earth once again, put that on the lower lash line, really just up nice, close, and personal, and then took Untouched and blended out that green shade just to smoke it out a little bit without having too much smokiness. And then I took the shade Naturally, which is kind of like a deep, deep plum with a lot of red. It almost looks brown, but it has some red in it. And I'm lining my lower and bottom lash line with this shade to just add some definition, and kind of just doing like a little bit of a baby wing. I'm still practicing my wings. I'm new to it. So just trying to get more practice in and perfect it just a little bit, but I don't like it too big. And then I took the shade Naked Eye, put that on the inner corner. It is the most beautiful, sparkliest shade ever. I love it. And then that is this simple, easy look with both eyes done. And then, of course, with my glasses on. Look number 2 is the most basic look of all 9. I started with Simplicity, which is a very just mid-tone light brown kind of shade in the crease here. I wanted this to be super fast and simple and just see what kind of look I could do on the everyday. I then took Barely There to just deepen it up in the outer corner, but it's still a pretty light shade. It's not deep at all. Just trying to add a little bit of definition from the Simplicity shade. Afterwards, I took Untouched, deepened it up just a teeny tiny bit, but as long as you're blending and not pressing and blending, you get a pretty light wash of color. Afterwards, I took the shade Nearly Natural, had to take the namesake shade in this palette and applied it just all over the lid, kind of avoiding the inner corner here because of course I'm going to go in with Naked Eye. It's my favorite shade in the palette. It's just so sparkly, and putting that on the inner lid plus the inner corner there to just add more sparkle. Then I took Barely There, put that on the lower lash line. I wanted the more, deeper brown than the Simplicity shade. And then of course I took Naturally, that's probably my favorite dark shade, and lined the lower and bottom lashes with this. Very simple look. Again, kind of just added a baby wing to the look just to get some practice in. I've kind of just been like on a little wing kick here. And here is the look completed with and without glasses. The third and final look with this palette is going to be very similar to the Sugar and Spice, where I took the shade Disrobe and I put it all over my lid for kind of a smoky brown kind of look. I guess you could say I'm trying to just kind of work on my skills while showing you looks. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do here, learn at the same time. So this was a lot of blending. I did this look before I did the sugar and spice look, so I spent a lot of time blending. Here I'm taking Nothing to See and blending out that really deep dark chocolate brown to just try and get more of a blend and work on my blending skills. And I also took that on the lower lash line because I wasn't going to want that darker shade on the lower lash line. So while I was just working on that shade, I figured I might as well do the lower lash line. And then after that, I wanted to take the shimmer shade Stripped Back, and I'm putting this all over the lid. I wanted to make sure I use this shade, and this was the best way to use it, so that's why I went in with it. And then I actually took a liquid black liner to do a wing and added false lashes, again, Lily lashes in the style Sassy. So that was all 3 looks with the Nearly Natural palette. I think after my 3 looks, the only shades I didn't use was Unveiled, Raw, and Second Skin, but I used 2 of those shades today. So that is the palette that I'm wearing today. I went in with Barely There all over the lid, deepened it up with Nothing to See, and then I used Raw on the outer half of the lid and Unveiled on the inner part of my lid. So the only shade I haven't used so far in this palette is Second Skin, but I don't think I'll have any trouble using this. I think this color story is so pretty. You have neutrals, but you have a little bit of something different with this green here, this kind of more blue silvery shade. It gives you something else to work with. So that's why this is my number 1. To me, if I was gonna recommend any of these palettes, it would be this one, but it's just gonna depend on your skill level for eyeshadow, because I can only relate it to myself. For me, these 2 shadows, will just kind of recap all 3 here. These 2 palettes were a little bit difficult for me to work with. It's going to take me some time and some practice to, I think, get looks out of these that I'm really happy with. They're just a little bit different than your mainstream brands, and I even have other indie brands that are easier to work with than this formula. Now, this one, I don't know. I could see myself decluttering this in the future only because I try to be pretty strict on not having too much in my collection. And I don't know how much use I'm going to get out of this. I hope I do. I love all 4 of these shades. They're not bad shades on their own. This is just like an incomplete palette for me. It's missing something. Whereas at least with the Sugar and Spice, I already said this, I'm going to repeat myself. Like I do like this color story. It's really just this one in particular I wish was a different shade. There's looks I can come up with, but I think because I was trying to use so many shades that it wasn't working for me. This palette maybe benefits from using 2 or 3 shades. Like these 3 shades here would look really pretty together, or just doing like the mint with black and brown or something. I think you could come up with some good looks. I just need to play around with using it how I want to and not necessarily using it for a video. But going back, this one's my favorite. I think this would work for anyone regardless of skill level. You don't necessarily have to tap it to get the pigment and then blend it out because they're browns. I think if you just kind of mess it up, don't blend it perfectly, it's kind of just more of a messy look. Brown's just more forgiving. So that's why I would recommend this one, other than just like really loving the color story. I know Glaminatrix, it kind of seems like they're finding their footing because they're really just changing up their formulas a little bit. I know this is their first like mass-produced lab palette, and I think that's what they're gonna do go forward. I do also want to mention before I forget, these 2 palettes, I believe you can't buy anymore as far as like a palette. You can only buy them as singles, and then you'd have to put them into a Z palette. So if that bothers you, then you probably just missed out. You can still pick up the Sugar and Spice palette though. That is still available. And I just saw that they sneak peeked another palette, and I don't know, we haven't seen the inside yet as of now. If it shows up by the time I edit and post this, I'll post a photo of it, but the outside looks very spring-like. It has flowers. I am very interested. If it's not too dark of a color story and it has like a spring vibe to it, I might pick it up. I'm hoping that it kind of just has like those pinks and purples and very springtime. So I'm gonna keep my eyes out for that one, and maybe you'll see another video from Glaminatrix in the future. But that's all that I have for you today. You'll have to let me know down below in the comments if you have any of these palettes, if you like them, plan on picking them up. And also, I would love your feedback on if you like this style of video. This is my first time doing looks and doing a voiceover to just talk about the looks. I really just wanted to maybe give some inspiration on what you can do with the palettes versus just doing a first impression, pulling you in closer and doing a look that way. So let me know your feedback down below, but that's where I'm gonna leave you all. I hope you're having a great day, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye everyone.